What happened to her that winter morning became one of those quiet, irreversible moments a person only understands long after it passes. From the outside, she looked steady, the kind of woman people described as responsible, smart, put together. But inside, something had been shifting for months, a gentle, persistent pull toward a truth she wasn't ready to face. It began the day she found the photograph. She hadn't been looking for it. She was just rearranging the shelves in her living room, wiping away dust that had somehow collected even in a week that felt like a blur. But when she pulled out the small box from the back of the cabinet, the one she hadn't opened in years, she felt a subtle tightening in her chest, a sense that something familiar, something she had forgotten, was waiting for her inside. Inside were scraps from her past, a ticket stub, an old bracelet, a crumpled note she once thought she'd never throw away, and then, at the bottom, the photograph. It was a picture of her from nearly a decade earlier, younger, not by age, but by essence. She wasn't smiling in the photo, but she looked alive in a way she couldn't explain. There was a softness in her gaze, a kind of unfiltered presence, a steadiness that came from someone who hadn't yet learned how to hide from herself. She stared at it longer than she meant to. The woman in the photo felt like a stranger and a mirror at the same time. She touched the corner gently, the paper worn at the edges, and whispered a question she didn't entirely intend to speak aloud. "Where did you go?" The house around her felt suddenly too quiet, not empty, just honest. Honest quiet is different from silence. Honest quiet tells the truth. She sat down on the floor, leaning against the cabinet, the photograph resting on her knee. The longer she looked, the more she felt a deep, unsettling recognition she had been living a life built on everything she thought she was supposed to be, and almost nothing she actually wanted. People admired her stability, her consistency, her responsible choices, but somewhere along the way, those choices had become walls. Walls she didn't notice until she realized she couldn't see over them anymore. She exhaled slowly, her breath catching on the way out. In the photograph, the younger her was sitting on an old wooden bench near a lake, a place she used to visit almost every weekend, a place she hadn't returned to in years. She didn't stop going because she stopped loving it. She stopped going because she gradually convinced herself she didn't have time for things that didn't move her forward. But forward to where? And at what cost? She closed her eyes, and in that stillness something surfaced. A memory she hadn't visited in years, a conversation with her father long before she understood the weight of adult life. They were sitting on the hood of his old car, the sun setting behind the trees. He said something simple, something she shrugged off at the time. "Be careful not to mistake momentum for meaning." Back then she didn't understand. She thought movement was the same as a progress, thought achievement was the same as fulfillment. But now, sitting on the floor of her quiet living room, holding a photograph of a woman she no longer recognized, the truth hit her in a wave. She had built a life full of momentum, but almost no meaning. She blinked and her eyes stung, not with sadness but with clarity. Clarity that felt both heavy and relieving, the way truth often does. She stood up slowly, still holding the photograph. The house felt different now, softer, more vulnerable, as if it too had been waiting for her to notice the life she had been moving through without truly inhabiting. She walked to the kitchen, set the photo gently on the counter, and poured herself water. The glass trembled slightly in her hand. Not from fear, from recognition. She took a sip, grounding herself in the taste, cool, clean, simple, a sensory anchor in a moment that felt like a quiet unraveling. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She sat in her kitchen with nothing to do, no tasks, no deadlines, no distractions, just her breath, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of a neighbor's dog barking, the quiet ache of rediscovering herself. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt loose, unmeasured. Eventually, she reached for the photograph again, but this time, instead of asking, "Where did you go?" a different question rose inside her. What happened to the woman who used to breathe? Not the woman who performed, not the woman who hustled, not the woman who built the stable, respectable life everyone admired, the woman who felt. She ran her thumb across the image slowly, and then a thought surfaced with the soft certainty of something that had been waiting patiently. Maybe she isn't gone. Maybe I just stopped listening. She didn't cry, she didn't break down, she didn't crumble, she simply existed, honestly and fully, for the first time and longer than she could admit. She realized she didn't miss the past, she missed herself, and that was something she could still return to. On the back of the photo, she found faint handwriting, her own from years ago. Remember what matters. 4 small words. A truth she had forgotten. She pressed the photo to her chest and breathed deeply. Something shifted, quiet as early light. She didn't need to remake her life. She just needed to pay attention again. That evening she drove to the lake from the photo. The air smelled of pine. The water was still and glassy. She sat on a bench and listened, leaves moving, water touching the shore, her own breath steady and real. She didn't feel lost, she felt rediscovered, as if the person she wanted was already there. Watching the water, she understood she wasn't seeking her old life, but making space for her true one. When the sky darkened, she stood, hand over heart, and took a slow breath. It felt like a beginning. She didn't know what the future would look like, but she knew life wasn't asking her to reinvent herself, only to return to herself. She walked back to her car feeling lighter, and what waited beyond wasn't louder, only deeper.